Well, are we about to see the Hammond, Indiana Bears? That's the biggest question NFL fans are asking after the state of Indiana House of Representatives approved a stadium finance authority that an attempt to move the Bears from nearby Illinois. So joining us now with some insight into all of this is Mitchell Armentrout. He covers government and politics and, of course, the Bears' new stadium drama, all for the Chicago Sun-Times. Mitchell, great to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. I guess let's get to the question everybody really wants to know here. Could the Bears actually really move to Indiana?
They certainly could. They've got a lot of lawmakers who are rolling out the red carpet for them. This is an idea that has been bounced around for the last few months. The Bears first raised this prospect back in December. As you know, they've been looking to lock down a deal for a new stadium for the last 3 years and change, probably a little bit more than that. First it was, are the Bears going to leave Soldier Field and go out to the suburbs? And then it was, are they actually just going to build a new stadium right next to Soldier Field? And then that proved to be a tall order for state lawmakers to get behind. So they've really kind of changed their focus 3 or 4 times so far. And yeah, the latest news this week, they sound pretty serious about exploring Hammond, Indiana, which is, it bumps up right against Chicago. It's a 20-minute drive from Soldier Field. It makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. And the Bears are, they're trying to see how good of a package they can get from state lawmakers because they haven't been able to get that at all here in Illinois.
So I want to talk a little bit about that because how much of this is maybe just political posturing? Maybe, obviously it's about financing coming from the state of Illinois. Obviously, it sounds like the state of Indiana would give them much larger grants and money here. But how much of this is just political posturing that in the hopes that JB Pritzker, the governor, softens his tune on this?
That's really like the $3 billion question is this the Bears crying wolf? That's certainly the view of some state lawmakers in Illinois. The Bears have made flirtations / threats to move to other cities and locales many, many times, going back to the 70s and 80s. They've made the Indiana threat before. But I think it's the Bears, certainly the folks that I talk to within the organization, they say that this is very serious, that, the McCaskey family is very determined to own their own stadium at some point, and they think this is the time to make it happen. What's really important to note is that whether or not Indiana is just a ploy to try and get some bargaining leverage for the Bears, it has moved the needle for them in Springfield among Illinois lawmakers. I mean, it was kind of a joke in the Illinois state capitol by the end of last fall session. The Bears had come down to Springfield at least 5 or 6 times and really just got nowhere with lawmakers. After they made that Indiana threat, suddenly the tune changed from Governor Pritzker, from some of the state lawmakers, the Chicago Democrats, who really don't want to see the Bears leave Chicago, let alone Illinois. So, it's moving the needle. It's moving the ball forward for them, whether or not it is a ploy. And at the end of the day, like the deal that Indiana lawmakers are putting out there, it's a pretty favorable one. It's worked out. It's essentially the same deal that was worked out for the Colts to open Lucas Oil Stadium down in Indy. Basically building a stadium for the team. The Bears have committed to spending $2 billion no matter what. They're going to put that into the stadium construction. The state would cover the rest of the difference, using a variety of food and beverage taxes, hotel taxes, and then the Bears would be tenants and then given an option to buy the stadium outright from the state of Indiana at the end of like a 35-year or so lease. This is a model we've seen in other cities, and the idea has obviously got its detractors in Illinois. The idea of public financing of stadiums has kind of tanked, in public opinion polls over the last few decades. But it's certainly something that Indiana has shown a willingness to do. They would love for the Bears to just come out and say, we're doing it. But the Bears are the wording of their statements all along the way certainly leaves the door for something to happen in Illinois.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second because it sounded like the statement, at least from Governor Pritzker's office, where they were surprised about what happened in Indiana because it sounded like there was supposed to be some sort of meeting they were supposed to be taking with Illinois representatives the same day that the Indiana thing was going on. Um, so, in your mind, what happened with Indiana yesterday and this meeting, you don't feel like this is like putting stakes in the ground and severing things with Illinois. It just seemed like the tone from Governor Pritzker seemed like he was really jolted by this.
Yeah, definitely. He was definitely surprised. Talked to some of the other. There's a couple other Chicago Democrats who are kind of being running points in these conversations that they've been going on with the Bears for months. I mean, the governor's office has been meeting with the team to try and make something happen on the bill that the Bears want. What the Bears have been looking for years is a tweak to state law that would allow them to negotiate um, basically a smaller payment than what they would pay for their property tax bill. That would also kind of simplify the process because there are a lot of different government bodies, specifically in the Arlington Heights site. There's a lot of different library boards, school boards. It can get complicated just putting those bills together. But at the end of the day, what they're looking for is a smaller property tax bill on what is a very large plot of land. Um, and, you know, Chicago Democrats who hold considerable sway in the Illinois General Assembly, for obvious reasons, don't want to see the Bears move. But there has been a willingness for this type of legislation, which would help out other kinds of businesses too, to attract big companies to Illinois. The governor has said that he's open to this type of legislation. What folks are concerned about is paying off the more than $500 million that are still owed on Soldier Field, which got a renovation back in 2003 that folks still like to make fun of as looking like a spaceship or a toilet bowl on the lakefront. That's still being paid off by taxpayers, by hotel taxes and some other bonds that are still being paid off right now. So why would, in a lot of Chicago Democrats' eyes, why help them build a new stadium in Arlington Heights? We're still helping them pay for Soldier Field. Where the progress has been made in the last month or so, last couple months since the Indiana threat, is Governor Pritzker is saying that they think they can find a way to make it work, to find some mechanism for the Soldier Field bonds to be paid off. And yeah, everyone had been sounding not necessarily hunky dory, but certainly optimistic about things for the last few weeks. And that's kind of why the governor was sort of caught off guard by this meeting that was called off, or there was a hearing on this Illinois legislation yesterday, which was called off at the same time that the Indiana hearing was going on to advance that state's legislation. Hearings get canceled all the time in Springfield for different reasons, but the Bears had specifically asked to hold the Illinois legislation so that they can make a few tweaks, and then they turned around and kind of changed the whole PR game with the Hammond announcement yesterday. So, still talking to the governor says he's still optimistic that they're going to make something happen to make the Arlington Heights move viable. The folks who are behind the scenes say that they're optimistic about that happening. Folks close to the Bears who I've talked to say that they're very much that is still an avenue that they can take. There is no imminent threat of the Bears fully changing their address to Indiana. They don't even have the exact site location pinned down on the map in Hammond. This area that they're looking at, it's an interesting area. It's right next to sort of a forest preserve area. It's also sort of around a very industrial area. It's literally across the street from an oil refinery. The Bears have said that they're looking at a golf course sort of general vicinity. This golf course was built a few decades ago over an old industrial landfill. So there's a lot of I's to dot and T's to cross here. We're a long ways away from probably seeing any renderings of anything there. So it was, for me personally, kind of surprising to see just the level of excitement for the Indiana legislators who had advanced this yesterday. We saw the mayor of Hammond. He was getting a little bit choked up on, at this committee hearing because obviously the prospect of bringing a major NFL franchise to your team. That's kind of any mayor's dream. That's a huge development. But it still seems several steps away from happening, to say the least.
You answered so many questions I was going to ask you. I guess what happens next? And I guess the other thing I would add is how do Bears fans feel about this?
The fans I talk to, I think the overwhelming sentiment is, can we just pick a lane here? Can we just get this done? I mean, you know better than anyone that most fans are watching on their TV. Football is a made for TV sport. Um, I've gone to a handful of Bears games over the course of my life. It's a great experience, but it's an extremely expensive one. It's also just a real pain in the neck to get in and out of Soldier Field, which is obviously a driver in this conversation too. Just the logistics of getting a lot of cars into a very small space. Um, but yeah, the fans in general, it's, hey, Arlington Heights sounds good. You can do a lot of beautiful things out there. Do that. Um, and there are folks who, I think a lot of folks kind of turn up their nose at the idea of, anything Indiana. There's obviously like a little Chicago Northwest Indiana rivalry in some respects, but also, I mean, I think both regions, there's a lot of common identity there. Um, but again, the experience for the majority of fans who do go to games, is it material different driving to Soldier Field versus driving to Hammond? It's really not that much of a difference, really, or even Gary if they were to go that way. But it sounds like the Bears are pretty set on Hammond, Indiana wise. Um, so I think the sentiment is, let's just finally get this ball across the finish line wherever you do it. We've been talking about this for close to 5 years, or I guess 4 years, because that's when they first announced their intention of acquiring the Arlington Heights site. Um, and it's a little bit exhausting. And of course, I'm biased in that respect because I'm sick of writing about this and thinking about this. But at the end of the day, they're going to have to go somewhere. They're going to make a lot of money wherever they go. Um, but obviously, they want to make sure that they're maximizing that.
So, Mitch, if you had to be a betting guy, what happens here? Where do the Bears end up going?
I this is just my own personal opinion. After observing this for a few years, I think the Bears really would love to have their own dome in Arlington Heights, despite the red carpet that is being rolled out for them in Indiana. The team has put tens of millions of dollars into a new practice facility, uh, or I should say, they renovated their practice facility, Hallis Hall, in Lake Forest a couple years back. Major investment that's quite close to Arlington Heights, or certainly a lot closer than it is to Hammond. They put a lot of money into the Northwest Burbs. They've got a huge fan base. They've got a huge fan base, obviously, across the entire region, but it is the Northwest suburbs. That is Chicago Bears territory pretty well through and through. I would personally predict, I see them eventually landing at some sort of deal to stay in Illinois, specifically Arlington Heights. But it's, at this stage of the game, Indiana is really doing everything they can to prevent that from happening.
Totally. Mitch, I mean, you probably wouldn't be able to answer this, but my last question, I guess, would be, the Chiefs moving from Missouri to Kansas, obviously they still stay as the Kansas City Chiefs. But I guess if the Bears, Chicago Bears, moved to Hammond, Indiana, would they still be called the Chicago Bears?
That's an interesting legal argument. Very famously, back when the Bears first threatened to move out to Arlington Heights back in the '70s, former Mayor Richard J. Daley, he said that if they did move away to the suburbs, that he would sue them. They'd have to call themselves the Arlington Heights Bears. You got to be within city limits to use that name. I don't know how that argument would hold up in court. I think that you would be dealing with those kinds of jokes for a long time. At the same time, again, I'm not terribly privy to New York fandom, but that's been the deal with the Jets and the Giants for years. They play out in the Meadowlands across the border in Jersey. And again, like Hammond, it feels a lot like Chicago in a lot of ways. There's a neighborhood down in that southeast corner of Chicago. It's called the East Side neighborhood, which it's essentially Northwest Indiana. A lot of the folks who live down there, they it's It's just kind of one big happy family. I don't think they would necessarily, in general, have too much of an issue with that, but I think from a branding perspective, yeah, the Indiana Bears just doesn't quite roll off the tongue. So I think we would shy away from that.
No, so, but by the way, the Meadowlands thing is very apropos. So that's a great comparison. Mitchell, it's such a pleasure to have your insights here with us. Thank you so much for joining us. Mitchell Armentrout covers government and politics, and of course the Bears' new stadium drama, which you'll still have tons of stuff to write about for the Chicago Sun-Times. Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And stay with Front Office Sports for more on the business and culture of sports.